This is the video presentation of Group 2 from Hume's 11I Revelations. Reproduction. What is it exactly? Reproduction is the process wherein organisms either mate, self-reproduce, or replicate in order for a particular kind of species to go on for multiple and even thousands of generations. And in this video, we'll be tackling about the two main ways of how plants, animals, and even other organisms, including us humans, reproduce. These are the sexual and asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction. The main key point that we can have in this topic is that it only requires a single parent in order for an organism to reproduce, meaning there are no meiosis nor fertilization involved in the stated process. The parent generates an offspring that is genetically identical to it, resulting to the continuation of race of such species. When it comes to plants, most oftentimes they reproduce through sexual reproduction. However, steady plants, most commonly in aquatic places, reproduce through asexual reproduction. Examples of this are sponges. As for the animals, the process occurs among planarians and polychaetes class of organisms such as worms. Furthermore, asexual reproduction can happen through 4 different ways that we will be discussing later on.
What is vegetative propagation? Vegetative propagation is a asexual reproduction that happens in plants. A new offspring will set to grow coming from its own parent plant or the fragments of the parent plant. Additionally, there are units of vegetative reproduction or the reproductional structure, also known as vegetative propagules, such as runner, rhizome, tuber, offset, and bulb. It actually happens in one of our favorite vegetable, the potato. It is an example of tuber and it grows on underground and the parent plant have a small nose called as eyes and that's where the new offspring will set to sprout. And that's when we will have different dishes of potato.
Binary fission is the simplest form of sexual reproduction where the body is separated into new bodies. An organism divides its genetic material or DNA into two parts by duplicating it. Each new body receives a copy of DNA. For example, the bacteria. Bacteria that exist in the soil or in the stomach of some mammals, including humans. These can divide evenly, resulting in two cells that are nearly identical.
Another type of asexual reproduction is budding. It is in which a new organism develops from an outgrowth or bud due to cell division at one particular site. In some species, buds may be produced from almost any point of the body, but in many cases, the budding is only found in specialized areas. The buds may break off and develop into a new organism or remain attached to the parent organism. Since the reproduction is asexual, the newly created organism is a clone and is genetically identical to the parent organism. This type of reproduction happens in animals without reproductive organs or those with both male and female reproductive organs such as flatworms, hydras, geese, sponge, jellyfish, sea anemones, and corals.
Asexual reproduction can also happen through fragmentation. And now we will talk about some informative lessons or things about fragmentation. In this type of asexual reproduction, an organism body is divided into two or more parts, wherein each fragment develops into an organism like its parents. And in this method of asexual reproduction is where the body of the organism breaks into smaller pieces called fragments, and each segment grows into an adult individuals. Some example of it is starfish, some worms, fungi, plants, and lichens. So, plant fragmentation, asexual reproduction, is done through spirogyra, each piece that grows into a new organism. Spirogyra, which is a plant in sea anemones, and as sea animals undergoes the process of fragmentation. It is a filament-type algae plant reproduces by the method of fragmentation. This form of asexual reproduction occurs in plants only. So, let's move on how it works asexual. Fragmentation is a form of asexual reproduction wherein a fragment of the parent breaks off and develops into an entirely new but genetically identical individuals. The parent will then regenerate or regrow the piece that broke off. So in the end, there are two new individuals from one. And so that's all. I hope you learned something about the reproduction through fragmentation. Thank you.
Regeneration. Regeneration is a sexual reproductive process that allows an organism to regenerate certain physiological parts. The process by which some organisms, bird can replicate in turning back, such as lizard tails, starfish arms, and even human livers to some extent.
Sexual reproduction is the process wherein two parents are mating or are involved into reproducing their own kind. Sexual reproduction can possibly occur among plants and animals. As for plants, it takes place when the gametes, or the male and female sex cells of a plant, unite to form a single cell called zygote. The futures of the parent's plants are present in these sex cells. Angiosperms, or flowers-bearing plants, reproduce sexually. Their flowers have male, female, or both portions that function as the plant's major reproductive organs, producing the gametes required for sexual reproduction. As for animals and other species, the sexes of sexually reproducing organisms are male and female, and they generate sperm and egg cells, which unite to form a zygote. When the sperm cell combines with an egg cell to produce a zygote, it develops into an animal with genetic information derived from the parent's genes. Overall, the main key point is from sexual reproduction is that it is a combination of two individuals of different sexes to reproduce.
Good day. Today we are going to talk about the parts used in pollination. There are two key parts that are included in pollination, and these are the female part and the male part of a plant. In the male part of a flower, this is called the stamen, which is composed with anther and the filament. The stamen produces pollen, and the semen of the male part is called nuclei. While on the other hand, the female part of a flower, or what they call the carpel, is composed with three main parts, which are the stigma, the style, and the ovary. Ovules can be found at the ovary, at the base of the flower. These are the parts used in pollination. While pollination and the process itself will be discussed by the next speaker.
The reproduction in plants starts with pollination, and there are two types of it, the self-pollination and the cross-pollination. The self-pollination requires the transfer of pollens from the anther to stigma without any agents. Meanwhile, the cross-pollination requires a pollinator able to transfer the pollens from one plant to another. Some examples of the pollinators or the agents are the animals, humans, wind, and air. Now, when the pollination and the germination already occurred, the fertilization happens. It is when the male gametes of a flower were transferred to a female reproduction organ. Once the gametes unite, it forms a diploid zygote in a seed.
In reproduction, there is one that we call conjugation. Conjugation is the process wherein two organisms that involve the same species with a similar appearance but have a different composition reproduce. Its organisms are reproducing through conjugation that include animal like protists or the bacteria and protozoans. The two organisms that have a similar appearance are combining together and exchanging micronuclear materials and splitting the process to continue its fusion. Another example of this are algae and fungi, which are increasing in number because of the stated process.
Syngamy, often known as fertilization, which is the process of human selection in which two gametes like sperm cell and egg cell or two gametes fuse to create a zygote. This procedure, however, does not always involve different gametes, nor does it necessitate the presence of flagella in sperm. Isogamy, oogamy, and paidogamy are the terms for the same thing. These gametes then fuse in a process known as syngamy, which refers to the joining of male and female gametes during the reproductive system in order to form an embryo. And an embryo is a phase of human during which vital bodily features such as organelles are produced or made.
Thank you for staying us until the very end of this video. It is now time to wrap up, and that is pretty much it about sexual and asexual reproduction among organisms. Once again, we are Group 2 from UMS 11I Revelations. Thank you.